Hello once again, dear children. The last time we were together, we looked at the theory behind plant hormones, and we spoke about the 3 hormones that we are going to be needing to know for this year, our matric syllabus. The auxins, just to recall, the gibberellins. I hope you got to know these names by now, and abscisic acid. Just as a recall, my spelling hasn't improved. Auxins are the ones found at the tips of the roots and stems, and they will bring about an increase in length of the roots and stems, and they also bring about a bending movement towards the stimulus, either it be light or gravity. This bending movement, my babies, or the growth, is known as the tropism. Gibberellins, we said, you remember it as Fred, but amongst all the functions, we says it gets the seeds out of dormancy. And it also gets your buds out of dormancy, bringing about growth again. Abscisic acid puts the buds and the seed to sleep, or it makes them dormant. With that at the back of our minds, let's now proceed to the variety of questions. And as we go to these questions, I want to make clear to you that you have to go into the question having the theory at the back of your mind. Many students just want to go through past year question papers and learn off memos. Please do not do that, because you will never find a question repeated in your examination. Yes, your theory would be asked 1,000,000 times over. If you know your theory, then you can apply your theory. Question number 1. The diagrams below represent the growth responses of 2 different plant organs to external stimuli. If there are 2 different plant organs, the only 2 different plant organs that we learned about was the root and the stem. Then we learned that the stem grows towards the light and the root grows towards the ground. So therefore, if you look at this, my darlings, this is a stimulus that comes from above, and this is a stimulus that is not going down. So therefore, this would represent a stimulus of gravity. A would represent the stimulus of light. Okay, I wish they had given you a little bit more detail, but it's okay, we can presume this here. So name the group of plant hormones that is responsible for the growth responses observed in the diagram. And the only group of plant hormones that is responsible for this typical bending movement like this is your auxins. Name the external stimulus at A. Of course, it's light, because the plant organ that grows towards light is stem. No? And D, it'll be gravity. Give one observable reason why plant organ B is a stem, because it is growing towards the stimulus of light. Always a stem will seek out the light because they are positively phototropic. This was supposed to be 1.5. It's not related to 1.4, so don't get confused. Explain the growth response observed in plant organ C. So, first of all, they didn't tell you what was the growth response. So when you say explain something, first you will say, what do you observe? What do you observe? You have observed that plant organ C is bending in response to the stimulus and is bending downwards. See, just saying bending won't get it. It won't be right. That plant organ C is bending downwards. Now you're going to explain it. And you would know that gravity, my darlings, gravity would cause the auxins now to gravitate towards or fall to the lower side of the root. Gravity will cause anything to fall. Actually, I would fall even faster and heavier because of my body mass, okay? So through gravity, the auxins accumulate. There'll be a higher concentration of auxins on the lower side, and there'll be a lower concentration of auxins on the upper side. Then what is the bottom line about high concentration of auxins in roots? In stems, It stimulates growth, high concentration of auxins. See, stems and stimulate. Stems, ST, stimulates ST. So the opposite will be for roots. In roots, what will it do, my darlings? Opposite of stimulate is inhibit. You are now in grade 12. You should know these words. So a high concentration of auxins in roots will inhibit growth. So you'll find that there will be an inhibition of growth on the lower side. So the upper side will have more cell elongation and more growth, causing the root to now bend and grow in response to the stimulus of gravity. Is that okay for you? All right. So very importantly to say, what did you observe? And explain why that by gravity the auxins will accumulate on the lower side. There'll be a higher concentration of auxins on the lower side of the root. This will now inhibit cell elongation and growth, and there will be more cell elongation and more growth on the upper side, causing the root to bend and grow downwards in response to gravity. Not too bad, was that? Now let's see what we check out in the second question. And you'll find that you can use that same knowledge in so many questions. Here we go. The diagram below represents a germinating seed. A germinating seed has a young root called a radicle and a young stem called a plumule. Don't get confused, even if they use the terms radicle and plumule, they will tell you what it is. Assume that the radicle and plumule were exposed to uniform light. Now, the minute they say uniform light, look for these little clues. You know, examiners have a way of giving you clues, but you've got a way of picking them up. The minute there's uniform light from all directions, you must know light is not a stimulus. Light is not a stimulus. So therefore, this particular germinating seed will be responding to gravity, not light. Okay? You understand that? And if it's responding to gravity, so through gravity, auxins will accumulate on the lower side of the stem. And through gravity, auxins will accumulate on the lower side of the root. But auxins in the stem will have a different effect as compared to the high concentration of auxins in the root. So here you will find that a high concentrations of auxins in the stem will stimulate growth. So you'll find that now there'll be more growth on the lower side. Okay, more growth on the lower side and less growth on the upper side, causing the stem to bend and grow upwards in response to light, because there was more growth on the lower side. With the roots, a high concentration here we learned inhibits growth. So the lower side, there'll be an inhibition of growth. Upper side, there will be growth. There'll be more growth and cell elongation, causing the root to now bend and grow downwards in response to gravity. Oh my God, I'm getting pretty good at this. There we go. And therefore, if they ask you to draw this, my darlings, that is a drawing that you're going to be doing. And predictable, they're going to ask you to draw this here. Okay? So, questions. Define tropism. Of course, tropism, my darlings, is the growth movement or the bending movement of a part of a plant in response to a stimulus. It's not in response to light. It's not in response to gravity, because what they did, they gave you a general statement. What did they give you, babies? They gave you a general statement, tropism. They didn't tell you phototropism or geotropism. They didn't tell you that. They just said tropism. So therefore, it's a growth movement or a bending movement of a part of a plant in response to an external stimulus. There we go, 2.2. Draw a labeled diagram to show the position of the radicle and plumule in the seedling 1 week later. Predictable, isn't that so? Like I said to you, you'd be able to predict all of this here. All right, and there is the diagram you would draw. Let me take out this line here because it is now going to distract us. So there we go. This is the diagram. Remember, you must put your caption. So there's your caption here. Seedling after 1 week. Let me make it bigger for you so you can concentrate. There's your plumule bending and growing up, and there's your radicle bending and going down in response to gravity. Coming up next, I'm going to show you how sometimes it becomes so difficult for you to follow a memo and then use that memo to answer a question. This is a typical example 2.3. State where auxins are produced in a plant. Of course, we know it's at the tip of the root and tip of the stem. However, for 4 marks, describe the effect. Let's look at it, make it a little bigger, dolls. Describe the effect of auxins on a plant stem that is exposed to unilateral light for 4 marks. Now, let me show you what a previous memo gave that answer as for 4 marks. And should you give this answer, babies, you will never get 4 marks. They said the stem grows 2 marks or bends 2 marks towards the light. Ridiculous. We will never give you 4 marks for that. You got to explain why the stem will bend or grow towards the light. You got to provide that explanation. So the explanation you would provide would look something like this. That light stimulus from one side causes the auxins to move to the shaded side. A higher concentration of auxins on the shaded side promotes cell elongation, resulting in more growth on the shaded side. Thus, the stem will grow towards the light stimulus. This is called phototropism. So very important. Sometimes they give this as a memo, and sometimes they expect you to say auxin concentration is higher on the shaded side, and they expect you to say it is lower on the brighter side. This promotes cell elongation and there will be more growth on the shaded side. And sometimes they expect you to say there will be less cell elongation and cell growth on the brighter side. So sometimes if you just want to be on the safe side, even though you think it is like logical, write down the obvious just to make sure you get your full mark. Now, that question was a typical reason why students lose out in the exams. They come out saying, but ma'am, I did so well. And then they find that they get a B and not an A. So cover all bases by giving absolutely full explanations for anything that is asked of you. Let's go to question number 3. Let's go to question number 3, babies. Okay, question 3. Let me just take this off. Sorry about that. Cancel. Let's take question 3. Let me make him a bigger. Okay, there we go. Now, what do you see in question 3? Let's read first. They didn't tell you what was a stimulus, but you can see something happening in question 3. The diagram below shows the growth movement of a part of a plant towards a stimulus. Now, the only part of a plant that you can see is the leaves and the stems. Now, they said towards a stimulus. So in other words, it's growing towards the light. Now, what's making it grow towards the light? Because light seems to be all over. There's no like unilateral light. Light seems to be everywhere. Although they're showing you those arrows to represent light, I don't know what they're actually representing there. But we look at the question and we'll be able to work out, because stimulus A is not light. But they said the growth movement of a part of a plant towards a stimulus. Now, when children saw this, they assumed that the stimulus was light. And that is where the problem was with this particular question. So I thought it was pretty unfair to present a question like this. You would be clearer about what I'm talking about as we go to the question. But here's this as a rule. To get greater clarity about what the examiner wants from you, always read the questions first. What growth movement is represented in the diagram? Identify the stimulus A. Name the growth hormone that is responsible for the growth movement. Will a high concentration of the growth movement named in question 3.3 stimulate or inhibit growth in the roots? And etc. So what growth movement is represented in the diagram? You can see a bending movement or a growth towards it. That will be tropism. Identify the stimulus labeled A. Let me take you here. Let me take you to 3.2. light. So they were growing towards light, and the growth movement was phototropism. So watch this, my darlings. Watch this. They were growing towards the light. They were growing towards the light. They were seeking out the light by growing away from the ground. So that growth movement, they called it phototropism. And they said that the stimulus was light. Strangely, they didn't indicate it as light coming from one source. So when they did this here, they expected students to know that there was light coming from one source. So that was the crazy thing about this here. Okay, so name the growth hormone that is responsible for the growth movement. Of course, it is auxins. It is auxins. So here, if we put what growth movement is represented by the diagram by putting tropism, then it would be wrong because you are moving towards light, phototropism. It would be. Will a high concentration of the growth hormone named stimulate or inhibit growth? Of course, in roots, we learned it inhibits growth. Name the phenomenon where the buds at the tip of the plant regulate the growth of the lateral branches. Of course, that is known as apical dominance. Let's go back and I'll tell you why I am so peeved at a question like this appearing for learners. Okay, because what's happening here is that this stem is growing away from gravity towards the light. Okay, I would have loved if they asked the children to describe why it is growing upwards and why didn't it grow straight downwards like this here or in its original direction that it was placed in. And that is because you would be able to explain that through the force of gravity, the auxins will accumulate on the lower side of the stem, and a high concentration of auxins in a stem stimulates growth. So there'll be more cell elongation, more growth on the lower side compared to the upper side. And this uneven growth will cause the stem to bend and grow upwards towards the light. So because the stem is growing towards the light, it is now known as phototropism. Okay, my loves. Okay, let's go to the next one. This will give you greater clarity about what I'm talking about and how definitive an examiner should be so that he doesn't place any stumbling blocks in the way of a student. Let me take out this red line here. Perhaps the red denotes my anger at having questions which are not clear. Question 4. Diagram A shows an upright pot plant. An upright pot plant. There we go. Diagram B shows the same pot plant 1 week after falling over. Look at how quickly, my darlings. So this is what I'm talking about. That's exactly what happened there is happening here. There we go. See this here? The plant was exposed to uniform light from all directions before and after falling over. So light is not the stimulus. So there's the problem that I experience with this particular question. Because actually here, this plant was responding to gravity. And by being negatively geotropic, it moved away from the ground. It so happened that it moved away from the ground that it moved towards the light. So technically, this is incorrect in saying that the stimulus was light. The stimulus was gravity. The stimulus here was gravity. It was responding to gravity. That is why I had a problem with this question. Because if you look here, they are telling you the stimulus is gravity. And if you look at the answers, you would see what I'm talking about, my darlings. And both of these are from your past year exam papers. Diagram A once again shows an upright pot plant. Diagram B shows the same pot plant 1 week after falling over. The plant was exposed to uniform light. Minute you see uniform light means light is not the stimulus. So what then would be the stimulus? Gravity, because it's only 2 stimuli you learned about. Which type of tropism is illustrated in diagram B? If you think I'm mistaken, papas, let's look at what they said. This is 4.1, hey? Which type of tropism? Can you see? Geotropism. But if you look at the other question that we went to, If you look at the other question, what did they say the type of tropism was here, babies? They said it was phototropism. Both from your past year question papers, and this is wrong. This is wrong in saying that this is phototropism. This is actually showing that your stem is negatively geotropic because it is responding to gravity by growing away from the ground. So in actual fact, what growth movement is represented over here, it is actually geotropism. It's a negatively geotropic movement. And the stimulus there would have been gravity. It cannot be light here and be gravity there, my darlings. I hope you understand what I'm saying, okay? Explain why the stem bent upwards. Of course, it's exactly what we did. The auxins will accumulate on the lower side of the stem, and a high concentration of auxins on the lower side will now, a high concentration of auxins on the lower side of the stem will stimulate growth, and there will be more growth, more cell elongation and more growth on the lower side, less cell elongation and less growth on the upper side, causing the stem to bend and grow upwards, seeking out the light. By the way, explain the advantage of the upward bending of the stem could have for the plant, but why will it seek out the light? Because you need the light for photosynthesis. You need the light for photosynthesis to expose the leaves to maximum light for photosynthesis. And then if you've got flowers, you want to expose your flowers to pollinating agents. Isn't that so, my darlings? Yeah. Explain the advantage. Now, here's another thing. When we say explain the advantage, we will say what the advantage is, and then we will talk about it. So you'll have two parts to the answer because they asked you for one advantage. Okay, so the leaves and stems will be carried in such a way that they will receive maximum sunlight for photosynthesis. You see? Or it exposes the flowers more favorably for pollination. Are you with me? You'll have two parts to your answers. Good. State how the roots in diagram B would react. Of course, the roots will now bend and grow towards the ground because roots will not stay horizontal. The roots will grow downwards or towards gravity. I'd like to say they will bend and grow downwards. Good, my darlings, and I hope that as we're going through this, you're getting greater clarity as to how to answer your questions, and you can pick up. You can actually pick up what are some of the little errors that you find in your question papers. And babies, you must be so sure about your knowledge that nobody should be able to shake you as long as your knowledge is scientifically correct. Question number 5. The diagram below shows two plants, A and B, at the start of an investigation. The plants were treated in the following ways. No changes were made to plant A, but the apical bud of plant B was removed. Now here they want to see what influence the auxins will have on a plant. What's the influence of auxins? Actually, auxins cause the upward growth of the plant, causes this stem to increase in length. In this case here, of course, the roots can also increase in length, but they're just showing you the stem. But the auxins will also bring about a bending movement if there is light from one direction. So if there's light from all directions, my darlings, if there's uniform light, let's put it that way, the stem would grow straight up. Let me show that to you. Okay. Axis, sorry. So if there was light from all directions, the stem will grow straight up. But notice there's light only coming from here. So therefore it will not grow straight up, it will bend and grow towards the light. So you wouldn't see this movement. So you can only have the bending movement if there's auxins present. So there are auxins here. So after a while, you'll actually see that plant A bending and growing towards the source of light because now you have unilateral light. Okay. Now, the only difference between plant A and plant B is that in plant A, you've got your tip of the stem. In other words, you've got your auxins. So if they're talking apical bud, papas, if they're talking apical bud, they're talking auxins. They're talking auxins. So here you got auxins. You got auxins. So that means you got auxins here. If they're talking no apical bud, That means here we're talking no auxins. Now, auxins just doesn't only bring about movement, but also it regulates the growth of your lateral branches or your lateral buds. It regulates the growth of the lateral buds, which give rise to branches. So when you got your auxins, there will be a great regulation of your lateral buds. But if there's no auxins, you will find that these lateral buds, boo-boos, will do as they please. They will start growing. So you'll get these buds growing. The buds from here will grow. You'll find that they will all tend to grow equally. Here, if the buds grow, these ones here, because if you're closer to the apical bud, you will have more regulation. If you're far away, you'll have less regulation. So you'll have this type of shape. Let me take out the other things. So if you've got your apical bud, then you'll have this type of shape where your younger branches, or your branches I'm not going to say younger branches, you're going to get confused. The branches closer to your bud would be smaller, and the branches far away from your apical bud will be longer. It's like, when the cat's away, the mice will play. This is what happens here. When a cat is here, oh my God, then there's lots of control. But when there's no cat, you take out the auxins, I will do as I please. So all those lateral buds will grow equally. So in other words, what they're doing here, they're testing, do you know the function of auxins? That's all. That's all they are testing. Nothing more than that. Therefore, as I said to you before, it is important to know your theory. You must know your theory, and then you can apply your theory. If you didn't know what auxins do, then you'd never be able to answer this. So let's look at the question. We've been so clever, we're trying to predict what the questions are. State the role of the boxes in the investigation. The boxes is to now provide unilateral light, to cut out the light from all directions except from one side. Name the hormone that is removed by cutting off. Oh, you wish for questions like this, wouldn't you? That is auxins. Tabulate two differences. Please, when they say tabulate, draw that table. Because just to draw that table is 1 mark. So even if you don't know the answer, if you just draw the table, you've already got 1 mark in the bag. Two differences between plant A and plant B. So we're looking for the answer to 5.3, and let's see. There we go. Let's look at it so that you can focus on the answer. In plant A, the stem of the plant will bend towards the light because bending movement is only brought about if auxins are present. In plant B, the stem of the plant will remain straight. By the way, it will not grow taller, isn't it? So because you removed your auxin, don't say that the stem in plant B will grow straight up. No. Definitely will not bend and definitely will not grow straight up. Okay? So this is what confuses here. Can you see this here? So they say that plant A will be taller. Of course, as it grows, it'll grow taller as well. Not only will it bend, there will be more growth because the auxins are present. But to say that plant B will be shorter, many children, definitely I wouldn't put the answer. I would say plant B will remain the same height because it doesn't have auxins. But let's look at this difference. Plant A will not have lateral branches, or I would prefer this one, or why? Because the apical bud will inhibit lateral branches, or only the lower lateral branches will start to grow. But with plant B, all the lateral branches will start to grow. You can either say it does not have lateral branches, or all the lateral branches would start to grow. Are you getting the hang of this, my darlings? Okay, let's go to question number next. 5.4. The diagram below shows plant B 7 days after being sprayed with gibberellins. When they're talking about gibberellins now, they're asking, do you know the function of gibberellins? And how did we remember the function of gibberellins? We remembered it by the mnemonic. And I hope you are memorizing these mnemonics. As all these lessons are to no avail, babies, because you got to have triggers to remember your work. So stimulates flower development, stimulates root. You can't see flowers, you can't see root. It gets your apical buds and your seeds out of dormancy. They're not focusing on it. So the only function of gibberellins that they're focusing on here would be E. And what is E, darlings, is that it promotes the elongation. Here we go again. Promotes the axis, sorry, one day I'll get this. Promotes the elongation of internodes. Remember I told you internodes refers to that. An internode is that area of the stem between two nodes. Okay, so here we go. So between that and that, this is an internode. Between that and that, between there and there, there's another internode. So if you think, if they say plant B 7 days after being sprayed, so there's plant B, which remained the same height. But if you sprayed gibberellins, it will grow taller. Now it cannot go taller because it doesn't have its auxins. But because we sprayed gibberellins, because the internodes got longer, therefore the plant became taller. So explain the effect. It will cause the plant to be taller because the internodes will now elongate. Simple. So they're asking you the function of gibberellins. Question number 6. Oh, these questions, you gotta get the hang of these questions, my darling, because they're so easy and they look so complicated. So kids figure, oh my God, this has got to be a difficult question. Okay. I'm sure your teacher told you what is a clinostat. If you don't know what's a clinostat, dolls, it's like a circle. It's a cardboard circle, onto which you pin your germinating seeds. And you can either make this cardboard circle, actually we have a wooden circle at school. You can either make this clinostat move by winding it. I don't know about you, but when I was young, when dinosaurs were alive, we used to wind our toys. Now you just got motors. So you can either make this clinostat move by winding it. So a wound clinostat, let's look at it, babies. You got to know this here, okay? So a wound clinostat, sorry, I picked up the wrong thing. A wound clinostat, if it's wound, this is not wound. Okay, darlings. A wound clinostat is a one that's moving. A wound clinostat moves. So that means an unwound clinostat will not move. So when we're talking movement, as far as you're concerned, if it doesn't move, means you will have the stimulus of gravity. So if there's no movement, there's a stimulus of gravity. So in other words, if it moves, what is it? We are removing the stimulus of gravity. Removing the stimulus of gravity. This is the only thing you have got to remember for this. If you remember this, papas, you got these questions in the bag. You'd be able to answer any one of these questions. So a wound clinostat, let me just emphasize, wound clinostat moves. And if it moves, you're removing the stimulus of gravity. So, can you remember? Let's go. Look at the question. A learner conducted an investigation to determine the effect of auxins and the effect of gravity on root growth. Oh my God. Generally, we just determine the effect of one thing on something, or determine the effect of temperature on rate of respiration, or determine the effect of light on photosynthesis. Here, you're determining the effect of two different factors. So in other words, here you have got two independent variables, two things that you changed. You changed either the presence or absence of auxins, and you actually exposed the plant to gravity, or you removed the stimulus of gravity. Now you think about question 6, read through it, I will give you a chance to look at it, and I hope to God you have this document. A learner conducted an investigation to determine the effect of auxins and the effect of gravity. He germinated pea seeds for 7 days. He then took a sample of 15 seeds and divided them into 3 groups. I will show you step by step how to answer this question. However, if you do have that question, look at it carefully, look at the question carefully, and try and work out the answers before I catch you in the next video. In the meantime, consolidate everything that we have been through. Until we meet again, have fun.